From FingerLakes1.com, welcome to another Sunday Conversation. I'm Josh Durso. This week, we follow up last week's chat with Yates County Sheriff Ron Spike with Cayuga County Sheriff Brian Schenck. We discussed the summer months, what policing looks like during that period, and also the implications of the legislative session which just ended in Albany. It was a fascinating chat and one you definitely will enjoy. We pick it up with the sheriff outlining what his department's efforts look like in the summer months, considering Cayuga County has two major bodies of water to patrol and contend with.
We do see an increase in the number of calls that we respond to in the summertime, and that's due to the fact that more people are out and active and doing things. They're not stuck in their homes due to the cold. So we do see an increase in the number of calls. We certainly see an increase in the activity out on our lakes as well. So we have boats out on the water, and we're dealing with those issues. And we also have our inmate work crew out doing work out in the field, our community services team. So we're very busy in the summertime with all those types of things.
What does that look like, I guess, would be the big question.
It's very challenging in Cayuga County. We do have a lot of lakefront. We have Owasco Lake entirely within our county. We cover a large portion of Cayuga County. We also border Lake Ontario at the north end of our county. So we patrol there, and we actually border a small portion of Skinny Atlas Lake. So we have a lot of lake frontage. We do put 3 boats out on the water each year, so we do have a boat on Cayuga Lake, on Owasco Lake, and also one on Lake Ontario all summer long. So it is a lot of real estate, a lot of lake frontage, lot to cover. This year's been very challenging with the high water on Lake Ontario. We still don't have our boat actually out on Lake Ontario yet. We're waiting for the water to come down a little bit, but that's been very challenging for us. But we have been busy up there helping with sandbagging efforts with our inmate work crew, so that's creating some additional work for us as well. So
obviously this isn't the first time Lake Ontario has seen this historic flooding. Is there anything, I guess, this time around that the sheriff's office or different folks who are working up there, from what you've seen, I have learned from 2 years ago when waters were high and the same sort of scenario played out? We did learn from last time that it's very challenging. We've got to wait for that water to come down a little bit because we encourage boaters not to be out there along the shoreline creating a wake, and so there's a lot less activity out there, not as many boats out there. I know the fishermen are still out there fishing, and some of the charter captains are still out there taking people out, but we don't want people creating any wakes, and we don't want a lot of activity on the shoreline. So our boat's not out there because the water is too high for us to dock our boat and really be out there and keep it up there safely. But I'm hoping the water comes down soon, and we learned from last time eventually it will, but it looks like this year it's going to take a little bit longer than it did in 2017. What does the patrol look like then, or how do you sort of police those areas if you can't have a boat in the water yet? How does that sort of shift and change for you guys?
If we had an emergency out on the water, then we would put our boat in the water to deal with that emergency. But as far as routine patrol goes, we're not going to do that on the water right now until that water levels down. We also have another concern with floating debris and that type of thing. There's a lot of debris in the lake due to the high water, and it's just not a good conducive situation to put our boat out there. And it's the same for other people that are trying to recreationally boat as well. They can't be out there enjoying the summer on the water yet.
So switching gears, when we talk about Cayuga Lake, obviously, you sort of have to share that responsibility, and I believe you and Sheriff Luce in Seneca County have sort of worked out a system. I'm assuming this isn't the first go-around, but how does that sort of relationship work, and how does that teamwork between the two departments work out for you guys?
Sheriff Luce and I talked about this some time ago, trying to combine our efforts in the patrol duties out on Cayuga Lake, because we both share lake frontage. We're both out there oftentimes with a boat at the same time, and then there might be other times where we don't have a boat out there. So right now we're sharing schedules. Our lieutenants on both sides of the lake that take care of our patrol schedules are sharing those schedules, and the goal is to try to make sure we have as many days covered and at least have one boat out on the water as many days as we can, shift responsibilities so that we can make sure we've got plenty of coverage out there. And we've actually teamed up with Seneca County, with the Sheriff's Office this year for some training for our navigation staff. Sheriff Luce hosted some training here recently, and we sent 3 of our members to that training. So we're trying to share in the training as well. So I think it's going to be a great partnership, and as we move forward, I think it'll be very beneficial for both of us and those that we serve on the lake.
So now that you have a little bit of time under your belt as sheriff, what are some of the things that you've picked up, some of the things maybe you've learned through experience over that time?
One of the biggest things I think is how challenging the struggle with time is. It's hard to meet all of the obligations and come up with enough time to do everything that you need to do in the course of a day. There's certainly a lot of meetings and a lot of work that comes along with that job. But I do enjoy it. I'm learning how to delegate a little bit more, so that's something that you have to do. And but it's going well. I think the time was the biggest surprise for me. Even though I knew I would be busy, it's a very busy position, but I do love it. With part-time staff, we actually have upwards of 175 people, so it's a large number. But it can be somewhat difficult to manage at times. But I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. I have some great administrative staff that work with me. If I didn't have them, it would be unmanageable. But I've got a great team with me that helps deal with that. So it's been quite a learning experience, but I believe it's going very well.
And when we look at the geography of a county like Cayuga, how do you approach that without letting or making any part of any individual community or any part of the county feel less important or maybe forgotten than other parts?
I'm trying to do my best to be accessible. I've shared my contact information in a number of ways through social media, our website, and something that I started doing this year that I'm proud of is attending town hall and village meetings throughout the county periodically. My goal is to attend at least 2 per month, and actually tonight I'll be in the town of Moravia at their board meeting at 6:30 p.m. to make myself accessible to the community residents in those areas. And I'm trying to do that throughout the entire county, so that if somebody has a public safety concern or an idea or would just like to discuss any issue with me, that they can come out to their town or village meeting and do that. And along the way, I'm certainly sharing all of my contact information and letting people know, don't be afraid to reach out to me directly if I can be of assistance. And if it's something that I can't help you with, I'm certainly going to do my best to get you in the direction where somebody can help you.
When you go to those town halls and those meetings, what are some of the common things that you're hearing?
One of the biggest concerns that I've seen is concern about aggressive driving, speeding. It's a problem everywhere. Many community residents have told me that they've had issues with people, whether it's speeding by their house or if they live near a stop sign. Maybe oftentimes they'll see people aggressively drive through that area without stopping. So I have to say that traffic safety is one of the biggest concerns at each of the town halls. And when I hear those things, we're trying to target those areas where there are some concerns. So I've been putting our deputies in touch with the individuals directly that have those concerns and making sure that they can connect with the person that has the problem and working together. Hopefully they can solve that. But unfortunately, we can't be everywhere all of the time. And I know that a lot of people are out there driving aggressively and unfortunately using cell phones while they're driving and that type of thing. So I urge people to slow down and don't drive so aggressively. But we are going to be out there working to enforce the traffic law in those problem areas when we hear about them.
How difficult is it in law enforcement in general when you're having to jump from perhaps dealing with aggressive driving or a speeding infraction or something of that like to maybe 5 or 10 minutes later a full-blown narcotics investigation? How do you balance the two, and how do you keep your deputies nimble enough, I guess, to be able to jump between the two?
Well, it can be very difficult, but we have to prioritize. So we have to prioritize if it's an emergency situation or something we need to get on right away. Certainly we're going to focus our resources on that area. But if we have some downtime after dealing with that situation and can get back to the traffic enforcement or do some proactive work like that, we're obviously going to do that. But that can be very challenging, and I have to say that's what makes this job so great. I love the fact that it's dynamic, it's always changing, And I have to admit, I miss being out there on the road at times doing some of that kind of thing. But that's what makes this job so exciting. It's different every day, and I love it.
Every time you come in, I've had Sheriff Verts in here, I've had Sheriff Luce in here. Every single member of law enforcement that I talk to says that recruitment is a major concern. Current state, given the way things are right now, right this second, is there anything that you're seeing that gives you a little bit of confidence or hope that those recruiting numbers will improve over the next several years?
I do have some hope. I see the great things that our law enforcement agencies are doing, especially on social media. If you track our agencies on social media, every agency in the area and really statewide and nationwide, they're doing so many great things out there in the community, not just our law enforcement efforts, but being connected with the community. And I think of all of the things that we're involved with. Just last week, we were involved with the law enforcement torch run for Special Olympics. A number of our members ran and participated in that, and I know a lot of law enforcement agencies here locally did the same thing. But I think that when it comes to recruiting, I think people are going to start to see that, this is an exciting career. It is dynamic. There's always something different to do every day, but also at the same time, we're giving back to our community. We're doing great things, and it's very rewarding. And I think as people start to see those things, they're going to have more of an interest in a law enforcement career. And it's been a great career. I would encourage anybody to take a look at this. And like most agencies here locally, we're giving our law enforcement test on September 14th, our entry-level exam, to be a police officer. So I would encourage anybody that has some type of interest to sign up for the exam or reach out to me or any chief or member of any law enforcement agency and get some more information about the job and how you can do it. That's another challenge in and of itself, but I think that it's important that leading the department, that your staff, right from the new recruit in the academy all the way up through your seasoned veterans, you need to make them feel like they're part of the department. Make them feel like it's a place that they want to work at. Make them feel like they're part of the team. I work very hard to make sure that our staff feels like they're part of a bigger team, that we're accomplishing great things, and I want to encourage them to share their ideas and be part of the decision-making process and not just feel like it's a job, but create opportunities where they can feel like they're giving back to the community and doing things that are very rewarding and keeping the job fresh and new. And I think that that's key. I know that all of our law enforcement agencies throughout the area, we're competing for a much smaller pool of people that are taking these exams, and it is hard to keep people and attract people, but we're going to have to work harder to make sure that we do that because it's going to be much more challenging as the years go on.
When you look at your own staffing levels right now, is the Cayuga County Sheriff's Office up to snuff, or where you're comfortable at least?
We're doing okay. We do currently have 4 people in various academies for the Road Patrol Division. We have 5 open positions in our jail. So we're working to hire some people for the jail, and we're going to be hosting an academy for custody at our office in September to fill those spots. So we do have 2 additional patrol positions that we're trying to fill as well. So we're keeping our head above water. I'm not at a place where I would like to be, but at the end of this month, actually next week, we're going to have 3 of those new recruits coming out of the police academy. So that's going to help us get our numbers up there a little bit. But I'm anticipating some retirements here moving forward, so I think it's going to be a constant challenge. I think we're going to be hiring and working with the academy to get people trained as we move forward. So I'm not exactly comfortable, but I know that other agencies are in a more difficult spot than we are right now, so I think we'll be okay.
And one of the programs that you've talked a lot about, that we've talked a lot about here, the School Resource Officer Program, that's one of the ones that you've seemed to be pretty proud of. In terms of just seeing the progress. And obviously when it comes to developing relationships with young people, that's a great way to get that ball rolling. How has that effort gone thus far in Cayuga County for you? And then where do you see the opportunities to sort of continue to grow the SRO program more broadly?
We still currently have a student resource officer, an SRO, in the BOCES campus. just outside of Auburn, and I anticipate that he'll be there for some time. I am in discussions with the Union Springs School District to try to work out a solution and give them some options to bring a school resource officer there. I'm not sure how that may work out, but we're working together to come up with some options. And I know some of the other schools do have some security guards and resource officers, but I've encouraged our road patrol people to stop by schools when they can and take a walk through and drive through the parking lot and even get out of the car and walk through the school when they can. I would love to have a deputy in each school, but for budgetary reasons that can be challenging. But even if we don't put a full-time deputy at the school, I've encouraged our people and will continue to encourage our people to be involved with the local schools and make sure that their presence is seen there, because not only for safety and security reasons, but I want students to feel secure and look up to us and build those personal relationships. And I recently attended a career day at Cato High School at the northern end of our county and spoke to the students about a career in law enforcement. And I love getting out there and doing those types of things and encouraging our members to get out there and do those types of events at the schools, just so we can maintain those relationships. And I think it's a very positive thing.
What do you hear when you talk to young people, when you talk to those high school students, maybe even college students or younger middle school students, as you have the opportunity? What do you hear? What are some of the things you hear when they're thinking about law enforcement and what law enforcement is, and then also to that end, what a career in law enforcement might look like?
I think a lot of kids are surprised to know just how many areas that you can look at when it comes to a law enforcement career. It's not just getting in a police car and going out and writing traffic tickets or arresting the bad guys or bad girls. There's so many other areas you can go. You can be a canine officer. You can work a navigation detail. You can be a member of a SWAT team, or in our custody division, you can work in the jail and be a member of a specialized team that deals with high-risk incidents in the jail. And there's so many different avenues that you can go in law enforcement. It's really endless. We have ATV patrols, we have snowmobiles, we have all types of different things that we do. And I think the kids are very surprised to hear about all of those things that you can actually do while working in a law enforcement career. It's not just driving around in a patrol car. There's lots of exciting areas that you can explore.
So when you look at, obviously, students are on social media in droves. Most students, most kids, teens are on social media. When they see the things that different law enforcement agencies are posting on social media, whether it's a request for the public's assistance or whether it's some of the events that you talked about earlier that you guys are involved in, does that help sort of bolster that image across the board for the whole community?
I think it does, absolutely. And I think you and I spoke before. I'd like to expand our social media presence, because as time's going on, I'm finding more and more people are relying on social media for their information and their news, and not just young people, but everybody. So I think that does help us, because we put a lot out there about what we're doing out in the community, because I want people to see what we're doing. But I think that does help folks that are interested in a law enforcement career see just all of the great things that they can be involved with if they take this career path, not just with our agency, but you'll notice that with most any agency here locally.
And now, to that end, do you think there will come a point where law enforcement has to start looking more intensely at training their deputies and their staffs to better handle social media and better handle the different pieces of technology, ultimately, that they're going to be interacting with on a daily basis, that maybe weren't part of the sort of 101 Academy classes that they took 5-10 years ago?
I think that we are going to have to look at social media and how we train our people to deal with it. I can say that I think that, and I laugh, I look at my young kids, they know so much about social media, and I'm always asking them how to use it. I think some of our younger folks that might be coming into this career field will already know much more about social media than many of us in the administration know about it. But one of the challenges I can see moving forward is we occasionally will receive reports of certain incidents on our social media platforms. So we do note on them that they are not monitored 24/7. There's not somebody watching them all the time. So we encourage people to make reports to 911 or call our dispatch center if they need assistance. But I can see moving into the future that we're going to have to be much more prepared to answer those requests for help from those social media platforms and make sure that we are on top of those. So moving forward, that's going to be a challenge for us.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it had just popped into my head that a lot of counties have gone to a 911 by text type service. Is that the next? You talked about it a little bit there, but do you see a point where if a sheriff's office or if a police department receives a message on Facebook, that will have to be processed at some point down the road, the same way that a call to the dispatchers would be, or a call to or a text message to a 911 center? Do you think there will eventually be sort of that parallel platform?
I could see that happening, and I think that's due in large part to the fact that so many people are accessing their social media pages and accounts all of the time. So I can see that as being something that would be utilized potentially in an emergency to make a report. But we're not prepared for that yet. So again, I have to encourage people, don't use that as a way to report an emergency. You still should contact 911. But moving forward in our digital age, I could see that being a platform where we will be taking reports that way.
So in theory, I'm really curious about this. If you were kind of game planning this out, if starting tomorrow you were going to have to answer all of the requests, or answer any request in theory that would come through a social platform, what would the manpower increase? What would that manpower increase look like, or what would it necessitate if you guys were to start answering those calls and answering all of those, not just within an hour or 2 hours, like what most response time is with Facebook pages, but to respond in the moment when the message is received?
That would certainly take some additional resources and additional manpower, and I'm not sure exactly how that would look, but we might need to integrate that into our 911 centers somehow so they can monitor that. But that would take a lot of time for somebody to be continually, looking at that page and determining if anybody's reached out to it. But that's an interesting discussion for down the road, and we're going to have to try to determine how we can handle those kind of things if we continue to move in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about social media platforms, what are the platforms that you guys use now, and what are the ones that you guys are sort of looking at as I'd like to start using this?
We're currently using Facebook regularly. I actually personally I have a Twitter page as sheriff that I put my information out on, and I have a personal Instagram page. I'm learning a little bit about Instagram. I think that we've got to move our department towards Instagram. So we're going to be bringing those other platforms on down the road here. But we do have a Twitter page with the sheriff's office that's slowly building steam. But Facebook has been the primary social media platform that we've been using.
And sort of as we wrap up here, when you look forward, when you look at the next, say, 2 years, what is the biggest change that you feel as of now is coming, that law enforcement really does have to start to prepare for? Obviously, a lot of debate right now as legislative session wraps up about legalization of marijuana. Doesn't look like it'll happen. It could happen. But what is one of the things that you guys are sort of watching that could be a very big change for what you guys do on a daily basis?
Well, as you just mentioned, some of the legislative changes that are coming down the pike, I'm believing that we will see legalized recreational use of marijuana coming in the future. That's going to create many challenges for us, especially dealing with people that are driving under the influence. In January of 2020, we have some changes in the law in regards to bail reform. Those are going to create some challenges for us, some very difficult challenges, but there is a lot of legislation coming down the road here, a lot of different changes. It's been kind of hard to keep up with, but when you talk about the challenges, I think that they will be some of the biggest challenges that we're going to see is dealing with some of the changes in the laws.
Bail reform, you mentioned it. What is the biggest implication for you guys on that side in terms of what we do know is coming now, or what we expect to see come next year?
With bail reform, there'll be a change in the law that won't allow us to basically or actually allow the courts to put bail on certain offenses if somebody's arrested and arraigned for those offenses. And for some of those, I'm not certain that I agree with the legislation as it's coming down. There are certain cases, for instance, burglary in the second degree. If somebody burglarizes your house, they could potentially be released back out into the community to go do that again, given the change in the legislation. There's certain scenarios that I'm thinking about that it would be difficult to deal with somebody and not be able to arraign them and potentially have a judge put bail on them. And so there's going to be some difficult challenges with that. I think there are certainly times when it's appropriate for somebody to be arraigned and incarcerated pending their charge with some bail. There are certainly times that I don't think that that's necessary, and perhaps we did need some reform in those areas. I don't disagree with that. I think it's just a little too broad, and there will be situations now and some serious crimes where somebody will potentially be accused of committing those and will not have bail or will not be incarcerated until their charge is dealt with.
What's the law enforcement's perspective when you sort of weigh these different issues? And it seems like the sensible solution would just be to apply more discretion or allow for more discretion and make things less black and white, when legislatively we seem to be moving in the opposite direction, which is make things more black and white, allow for less wiggle room. Seems to be how we got into how this problem was created in the first place. What's law enforcement's perspective there?
I think it's very clear that we are losing a lot of our discretion, and I'm not comfortable with that. I think that we have to trust in our law enforcement agencies. We have to trust in our officers, and I think oftentimes legislation is coming to try to correct an issue that maybe isn't as broad as some people think, or maybe there's really a better way to deal with that issue than such a broad legislative change that takes away our discretion. But in many ways, our hands are being tied with some of these new changes in the law that are coming down the road here, and I don't believe oftentimes that's the right way to handle those things.
And one of the questions that we saw pop up on social media before we sat down for this interview was, with the recent news that undocumented immigrants would be able to obtain licenses, does that make any part of the policing effort easier in terms of identifying people? Obviously, taking the politics out of it, does it translate at all to an easier means to figure out who law enforcement is dealing with when they're out there on the road?
I'm very concerned, and I don't know how this is going to be handled yet, but I'm concerned that our local Department of Motor Vehicles, our DMVs, are not going to have the tools they need to verify documents that undocumented aliens are going to be able to present to get an actual driver's license. So my concern is, if somebody presents a document from another country that's not a valid document and ultimately winds up with a valid New York State driver's license with an ID, and maybe that's not that person, I don't know that it is going to make our job easier. So I'm not sure how those documents are going to be validated yet. I have some concerns about how this is going to be implemented, and so I'm just not real comfortable with how this is going to happen. And I also have some concerns with the fact that we won't be able to cooperate or work with federal authorities on immigration issues in these situations. We won't be able to share information, and it puts us against them in certain situations. So I don't like the fact that we can't help federal authorities enforce federal immigration laws in this situation. We can't share information that we obtain from the DMV relative to these cases. So there's a number of issues, and I just have to look and see how this implementation is going to go before I can form an actual opinion.
Appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening along. If you have to this point, new episodes of the podcast are published every Sunday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course the FingerLakes1.com app, which is available for Android and iOS devices. Special thanks to our guest and of course the team at FingerLakes1.com who make this all possible. I will see you next week.